You know the feeling. The argument has stopped, but the silence between them is suffocating. One person is staring at the table, running through every word they just said, cataloging their mistakes. The other is looking away, entirely convinced they did absolutely nothing wrong. Look closely at the person absorbing the tension. They are the guilt carrier. If a dish breaks, if the tone of a text message seems off, or if the room suddenly feels cold, they assume it is their fault. They apologize for things they have no control over. Living like this is exhausting. Inside, the guilt carrier operates on a constant low-level frequency of shame. They carry a deep-seated suspicion that they are somehow too much for others to handle, yet not enough to get things right. Now look at the person across the room, the blame deflector. Accountability simply slides off them. They present as totally armored, fiercely certain, and unbothered by the concept of personal fault. When conflict arises, they immediately locate the problem outside of themselves. We tend to view these behaviors as fixed personality types. We assume the apologetic person is naturally anxious, and the defiant person is naturally stubborn. But these aren't permanent traits. The person holding all the guilt and the person refusing to hold any are actually running from the exact same invisible threat. To understand where these patterns begin, we have to look back at how children survive environments that lack emotional safety. When caregivers are unpredictable, dismissive, or abusive, a child cannot comprehend that the adults are failing them. Instead, they internalize the isolation as proof of their own inherent badness. Psychologists call this toxic shame. This model illustrates the deflector's survival strategy, projection. To survive the psychic pain of toxic shame, they build psychological armor. Projection forces that feeling of inadequacy outward. By making sure the badness exists as an external threat, the deflector protects their own fragile core. Conversely, this model shows the guilt carrier's adaptation, introjection. To maintain a connection with a volatile parent, the child absorbs the blame. They decide taking on the fault keeps their environment stable. They trade their own self-worth for emotional safety. Introjection and projection are opposite psychological adaptations to the exact same childhood trauma of abandonment. One person learned to survive by pushing the shame away, and the other learned to survive by swallowing it. In adulthood, these two survival strategies create an unconscious magnetic pull. A person desperate to deflect blame instinctively finds someone conditioned to absorb it. This diagram illustrates projective identification. It is the active, psychological handoff of emotional weight from one psyche to a willing host. The deflector subconsciously requires this human receptacle. They need someone to process their repressed shame so they never have to feel it themselves, and the guilt carrier reflexively accepts the transfer, mistaking the absorption of their partner's pain for an act of love. Psychoanalyst Melanie Klein mapped these unconscious defenses in the mid-20th century, observing how individuals split off unacceptable parts of themselves and forced them onto others. In this relationship ecosystem, the carrier's chronic self-blame provides the structural stability the deflector requires to remain unbothered. It is the literal fuel that keeps the shared dynamic running. Eventually, the exhaustion of the guilt carrier becomes too heavy to ignore. It leads to a slow, difficult recognition. The emotional luggage you've carried for years was never actually yours. Family systems therapists refer to this role as the identified patient, the designated scapegoat required to hold the collective dysfunction of a toxic family or relationship. Reclaiming yourself from this role is a gradual process of disentangling. You have to accept that you cannot heal a psychological wound that belongs to someone else's nervous system. This leads to the uncomfortable practice of discernment. It is the effort to create a fraction of a second of space between the surge of shame and the automatic apology. In that pause, you have to do the heavy lifting of questioning your own instincts. You ask, did I actually cause harm here, or was this shame handed to me? You slowly unburden the emotional scale by refusing to catch the projections being thrown at you. You let the blame hit the floor. True emotional responsibility requires the fierce ownership of your own mistakes, alongside a total refusal to house the projected shame of others.